No amount of study is going to prepare you for the moment that you walk into your practical training. Somebody is going to be sitting in front of you and trusting you with their feet. I still remember the first time I walked into practical training. I had my cubicle area, my instruments, and everything that I needed for a foot care treatment. But getting to that moment actually took quite a bit of planning. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about things to think about for practical training, the hands-on learning experience, the extra bit of work, which was a surprise to me, but we'll get into that later, and also starting to think about actually setting up your foot care business. My name is Jess. Hi, I'm a self-employed foot health practitioner in the UK, and this video is part of my mini-series where I'm taking you from thinking about becoming a foot health practitioner right through to qualifying and setting up your own foot care business. So you've completed your theory, congratulations, well done. And the next step is actually book onto your practical training if you haven't done so already. However, there are still things that you need to think about before actually going to your practical training. So time off work, asking your employer if you can have 2 weeks off to attend your training. Accommodation if the training isn't local. And also you're thinking about your instruments. So what will you be using when you're doing your practical training? Now, I remember when I was at this stage where I was ready to do my practical training, but there were certain steps that I needed to put in place first. And the biggest one was my family and finding that time to attend my practical training while having a young family. So at the time, my little girl, she was 4 months old. So we decided as a family that we would try to find accommodation where we could all be there together. So my husband and my daughter, they would be in the accommodation while I would go off every day to practical training. This proved a little bit difficult. So my training provider, they provide all students with a list of different places that you can stay at a discount for the 2 weeks. So I knew what our situation was, but I still thought I would contact them and ask to see whether they would take us as a family. They wouldn't do that, which was understandable. We knew that that would probably be the case, but we thought we'd try anyway. But because they didn't, our only option was to rent an Airbnb. So we rented an Airbnb for the 2 whole weeks. So we packed up our bags. It was around December time. So we kind of thought we would make it into kind of like a holiday for them, but not for me. So we made it into a holiday. So we packed the Christmas tree, we packed the presents, and we made home in this Airbnb for the 2 weeks. And when it was the weekend, I would spend time with the family. The only disadvantage about where we stayed was that it wasn't as close to the training as I would have liked it. So when we were planning everything, I ended up bringing my bike. That was the only option, that I would bike it there every morning and then I'd bike it back after the day of clinical training. So bear in mind, this was December, this was Christmas, so it was cold. So I would ride it in the rain. I would ride it when it was freezing, but I did it. And I'm so glad I did looking back. But these are definitely things to think about, especially if you've got like a young family. Now let's talk about the actual training. So my first day arriving, I was nervous as hell, but I was also excited because I knew that I was at the end game. I was nearly there. I was nearly touching that self-employed life of being a foot health practitioner. So I was excited. So when I arrived, I was always the first one there. And it just used to be a time for me to just stop and reflect and just chill out before the beginning of the day. So it was nice to have that quiet time before people started arriving, right? So all the other girls. Now, luckily, it was a very small number of girls. I think there was about 5 of us all together because it was the end of the year. It was December time. A lot of people were away. So on the first day, we were given our instruments that we bought prior to attending practical training, a variety of instruments that we'll be using in the clinic. We were also given quite a lot of handouts, so a lot of paper. So when I first walked into the clinic area, we all had to choose, or I think we chose, or we were given our own cubicle area. So this had our own podiatry couch. It had our own little table and a little bin so that we could get rid of clinical waste. And we was able to stick things on the wall to sort of help us during the clinical training, like abbreviations when it came to writing up our SOAP notes. Now, this was probably the most hardest part of the clinical training, more so than actually treating the feet, was making sure that I was writing the SOAP notes correctly and remembering all the abbreviations, because there was a lot of them. So they, like I mentioned, they did allow us to put it on the wall so that as we were writing our notes, we could remember. So I do still have the paperwork from when I was on my clinical training. So this was in the cubicle with me, and it's a list of clinical abbreviations and terminology. So it's like on 2 pages. I'd probably do like a zoom in of that, but it was a lot, and it was hard to remember all of this, so it was very handy to be able to stick this up on the wall. They also gave us a drawing, a diagram of a foot, and it was there to help us to be able to write on our SOAP notes where certain problems were on the foot. So like the metatarsal, like the first MPJs, and the plantar of the foot, and the PCA and all that type of stuff, the distal, the proximal, the lateral side, the medial side, all these clinical terminology, which didn't come, easy for me when I was doing my SOAP notes. I found it very difficult actually, but this really did help. So I did have this on my wall, and I referred to it very often. How the day usually started when people started coming through the door to have their feet treated. The trainer would come in with a bunch of notes. So the notes of everybody sitting in the waiting area. And on those notes, it had what they were coming in for. So it would have been like an ingrown toenail, or a corn, or just hard skin, callus. And we had to choose which one we wanted to deal with. Now, one thing that I felt I learned in the beginning was to not be shy, because if there was a treatment that you really wanted to be able to do and that you wanted to become more confident in, if you didn't put your hand up, it would just get taken by somebody else. So I encourage you not to be shy. Step forward or put your hand up so that you don't miss out on a learning opportunity. So the people who are coming to see you for foot care treatment, they know that you're a student. So they are very patient. A lot of them are very encouraging. The conversations that I had were really encouraging. And also some of them were quite real. One of the guys that came to see me, he's an old guy, and he said to me, because I used to talk a lot, and he said to me, "Jessica, you're going to lose money if you keep talking so much." And I was like, okay. So I felt like I was getting business advice from the people that I was treating. Honestly, they were so real, they were so nice, they were so encouraging. One of my biggest struggles was timing. I felt that I was very slow. Well, I knew I was slow. I was slow because I used to like to talk. I was a little bit of a perfectionist. I wanted to make sure that I'd done everything right. And obviously one of the old guys called me out on it. So I was very aware of that. So I started out feeling quite confident, to then feeling quite deflated because I was slow and I didn't understand all the abbreviations and the SOAP notes, to then gaining my confidence again as I kept seeing more and more people and gaining more experience. So it is a little bit of a roller coaster of emotions, but at the end of it, you do finish feeling much more confident than what you did when you started. Now, what I didn't realize was that even though it's practical training, there's homework. So at the end of the day, there was a list of medications on the board, and we had to go back to our accommodation and we had to read up about these different medications. And we also had to write in our reflective journals. So areas that we could improve, areas which we felt we did really well in, and then we had to write it all up. And I remember that one of the trainers, I think at the end of the first week, they kind of read through our reflections. So it was kind of like a one-to-one where you could discuss a few things from my memory, if my memory serves me right. But I found it a really good practice. I always say about reflective practice, do it. Honestly, it helps you to learn more about yourself, and it shows you areas which you can improve in, and also areas where you can give yourself a pat on the back. In the second week, I don't remember if it was the beginning or near the end, we had to write a case study. So it could be about anybody that we'd seen, or we could just make it up. So I think I made it up, and I wrote about an antalgic gait. What I didn't realise was that the next day, we would have to read it in front of all the people that were on the training with us, so all the other students. We didn't have many in our group, I think there was about 5, so it was okay. It weren't too bad. But all these different things I wasn't expecting on practical training, as well as doing a little mini test at the end. So I think it was I don't know if it was a tick box sort of test at the end. I don't remember, but I remember sitting there thinking, I didn't sign up for this, for more studying, but I did it, and obviously I passed. But it was a little bit, it did take me back a bit, because I kind of felt, okay, I didn't realise that I had to do all this stuff. I don't remember it being mentioned, but it was all right. I did it. So towards the end of the training, the principal, he spoke to us very briefly about, I guess, the business side. It was more talking about pricing our services, insurance and membership. And I believe that was it. So it wasn't massively explained. I felt like a lot of the information about the business side of it was just us asking trainers here and there throughout the 2 weeks, what's the best creams to use, or where to get the best products, or, you know, where to get our supplies from. So it wasn't so much it being taught to us, it was more us asking whoever there was, because a lot of the trainers, they were podiatrists who had their own businesses. So we would just ask them questions. And that basically was the business that I took from my practical training, which was, I guess, a little bit disappointing. Looking back now, it makes me see why a lot of people contact me asking me about the business side, because it's an area that a lot of us just was not prepared for. So I understand why you have loads of questions about setting up your foot care business. So this is one of the reasons why I created the Foot Health Practitioner Startup Guide. So if you're just qualifying and you're setting up your business and you're still a little bit unsure, I'll leave a link below if you think that this will help you. So practical training is really the time where things start to come together. You're no longer just reading about it, you're actually doing it. But now that training is finished and you've qualified, now what do you actually do next? And that's exactly what I'm going to be talking about in the next video. I'll see you over there.